and welcome into the Lone Star Varsity Preview Show, brought to you by the University Medical Center and the guys at AJ Media. I'm Mike Graham.
And I'm Bryan, and we're at the Lone Star Varsity high school sports staff.
Well, Bryan, it's week 8, and we got some really good games. Some rivalry games are starting to hop up on the schedule. Everyone's in district play finally. It's a really exciting time to be in the high school football season.
We're very deep into the season, and a lot of good games coming up, including, like you had mentioned, a rivalry game on Friday night.
Absolutely. Monterey will be the away team at Lowry Field to play Coronado at 7:30 p.m. Friday night. And I think this is a really big game, not only because it's a rivalry game and draws the two communities in, but also just the way it's played out in the district standings. I feel like you're not going to win District 4 5A with more than one loss, and these two teams are at the top of the chart right now. They're both 1-0, and one team's going to keep on keeping on, and one team's going to fall back to the middle of the pack this week.
These two teams in the last couple of years when they've met, have kind of traded some blows, and Monterey's come out on top, Coronado's come out on top. So coming into this one, it's kind of hard to decide or to foretell who's going to win it. But like you said, they're both sitting atop the standings. This might be one of the more interesting games out of this district, which is a very tough 4-5A district with Lubbock-Cooper, Abilene-Cooper, Monterey, Coronado, Lubbock High, San Angelo, Lakeview. So I'm excited for this one. I get to, again, come out to one of the more premier games on Friday, and I think it's going to be a good one.
We could talk all day about their bodies of work through non-district, but what we do know is that Monterey got an impressive win against Abilene-Cooper last week. 51-44, went right down to the wire. Coronado wasn't pushed at all. They played Lakeview. I think people know that Lakeview's not a very good football team this year, and Coronado dismantled them. I mean, it was 63-6. How big is it to have big game experience before maybe your most major game of the season?
I think just seeing it in general from a player's aspect and maybe from the coaching staff's aspect, seeing those big-time games and coming up with big-time moments where you're able to swing the win in your direction, just help you in the long run because, when you have to handle some adversity or you're dealt that moment again, you're already prepared for it.
Yeah, I feel like Monterey, got dealt the worst early district schedule. Abilene-Cooper and Coronado in back-to-back weeks to start the thing. If they clear this, they're going to be looking pretty good in this thing.
I think so, and I think, like you had mentioned earlier, they have a good body of work, and it's possible that they might come away with this one.
So we'll just break down the two teams, and I think what stands out about them immediately is how similar their quarterbacks are, except that one's right-handed and one's left-handed. You got the lefty from Monterey, Bryan Lawson-Young, versus Quay Gray, a righty who threw for 4,000 yards last year. Isn't quite on that pace this year. But he certainly added new dimensions to a game, and the same can be said for Lawson-Young. Both of them can run the balls for their teams. Yeah,
they kind of, I wouldn't say they emerged at the same time as this dual threat, but they've both developed into these rushing quarterbacks, or quarterbacks that can rush rather when needed. Bryan Lawson-Young has picked up more yardage on the ground, but Quay has been able to punch in some scores and do some really good things with his legs, which I think we could have anticipated with some speed that he showed off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the quarterbacks, the lefty and the righty, that's an interesting aspect. Didn't see it from there. But they're very quarterback-centered offenses, and I expect for both of them to have big games. And the defense, I think, will be one of the bigger determining factors on both ends.
Absolutely, and we'll get there. But wanted to talk about the guys that are going to complement these receivers, too, because Monterey's really showed up last week. Xavier White and Trey Manhan in particular had extremely big plays, both with touchdowns, receptions of more than 50 yards. Blair Conwright scored 4 touchdowns in Coronado's win against Lakeview. A lot of receivers scored a lot of touchdowns in that game. I think that it's easy to say that Coronado's deeper. I think they have 6 guys that they can rotate in and out. But what do you see from these sets of receivers, and how much of an impact do you think they'll have on this game?
Big playability, and I think either receiving core can have a huge impact in this game with those quarterbacks behind your offensive line and them downfield. Anything I think could happen on any particular play. Both receiving cores, like you had mentioned, Xavier White, Trey Manhan, and then you have Coronado's wide receivers who, like you had mentioned, are almost 6 players deep. I just think in general that with the two squads coming together, that you have big playability with your wide receivers that you have. And Blair Conwright definitely showed that off 2 weeks ago, not only last week, but 2 weeks ago as well.
Absolutely, and then just finally the running game. I think the edge goes to Coronado. They're never short of good running backs this year. I mean, Jared Compton, their senior star, gets hurt on the first series in the first game against Plainview at the beginning of the season. So in comes sophomore Caleb Manuel. He's tearing it up. They're taking the pressure off of Quay to run the football. Bryan Lawson-Young, his running backs get some big plays, and they definitely look like they're finding their stride. But I wouldn't say they're there yet, and I'd say that a lot falls onto him. After all, it was him that converted the 3rd and 13 to win the game against Cooper last week. Because if they hadn't, they were going to punt the ball back to Cooper. They would have had a chance to win. And my point there is the most dependable runner on Monterey's team is Lawson-Young right now, I'd say. Yeah,
in the years past, it's always been, at least for the Plainsmen, the quarterback who's been the premier runner for Monterey. So I kind of anticipated it being Lawson-Young at the beginning of the year. When you look at Coronado's backfield, it's hard to believe that they're only 3 players deep with the running back position, because everybody who steps up, it seems like they've been working out at that position for a while now.
Absolutely. and then finally defense. I think people know that Coronado has an established defense. Miguel Garcia led the state in sacks last year. Trey Stevens led the state as far as 5A players and total tackles. They're back. They're doing awesome. No one's really pushed Coronado on an offense to defensive, kind of battle where Coronado's on defense. But I think Monterey's, especially the front, is a little underrated. And this is a group, and I feel like the defensive backs came up last week, 3 interceptions in the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you couldn't feel much better about the Monterey defense going up against the vaunted Coronado defense as you do now.
Yeah, I think that the defense, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, it's going to come down to 2 defensive squads kind of creating some turnovers. I think when you look at both offenses, they're definitely going to get into the end zone. But the defense that can force the other to give up the ball more times, I think is going to come out with a win on Friday night.
Absolutely. We will pick that game at the end of the show. But we'll move on to the first game of the week, which is Levelland at Estacado. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff tomorrow at Lowry Field, the traditional Thursday game at the LASD complex. And might be a good one. You've got a Levelland team that's been kind of up and down, 3-3, got an open date last week. Estacado has no open dates until it finishes its 10th game of the season, and then it'll be off in week 11 of the regular season before its by-district playoff game. But they beat Mountain View 42-0 last week, and they won that game, and I think everyone would agree that it was a really lackluster showing, and that's the margin that they beat them by. So this is the beginning of District 1 4A Division I play for both these teams, and I think it might be a good game. A well-rested Levelland team versus a Estacado team that's been blowing people away since losing in week 1 to a 5A school.
I think so. I think Levelland has the players to make this interesting. I think they have an excellent coach in Curtis Lowry. And Estacado is on the same end of that spectrum and having a great coach and a great just team in general. I think Levelland can make this one interesting, but I also think Estacado is kind of due for a win on this one. In the last couple of years, Estacado has been in the game, but they weren't able to come out with it in the end, and I think this is the squad to do so. Not to give any early hints away before we made our picks, but I think Levelland has the team to make it interesting.
I'll tell you that the general public out there probably has Estacado pegged to win this game, but I think that Levelland has the biggest X-factor players. You're getting consistent performances from everyone across Estacado. I think about like Chris Gerber. He's a guy already at 2,000 total yards, almost split evenly between the pass and run, just a little bit of a lean to the pass. Zach Estrada has 621 receiving yards. And then they've got a running back, Tristan Van Zandt, over 500 yards. So he's on pace for about 1,000 yards through the regular season. And I think if those guys can step up and if they can retain possession, I think that those are the 2 biggest things. Retaining possession, not giving Estacado a lot of extra opportunities on offense, because that offense is explosive.
Yeah.
And, and then just these 3 key players stepping up and playing at the maximum of their potential.
With Estacado's upside on offense, I think retaining possession, like you said, is very key. Keep them off field, keep your offense on field. If you're not necessarily scoring, just make sure you keep that offense off the field, because they got players that are hard to contain in the run game and in the pass game.
Now, this is an interesting district because you really don't have to do anything in it, and you still make the playoffs. There are only 4 teams in it. Pampa and Borger round this thing out, and everyone's going to go to the playoffs. So I was talking to the coaches earlier today, and just, is there an incentive to win the district? And they said, of course there is, because it's out there. You play for it. And I thought that was interesting because it would be easy to throw away these games for teams that, I mean, what I'm trying to say is if you lose it, it's easy to throw them away because everyone's making the playoffs. And that might become, that become a serious thing in other districts if a team just started shrugging off its losses in district.
In this district, I don't think you're playing, or you play for the district title, but you're also playing for the playoffs. You want to be hot when you hit the playoffs. You want your team to enjoy that extended season, and I think in this district, that's what you're kind of working towards. And the title, of course. It's always good to have a district title.
Yeah, and historically, this has been a competitive game between these two teams the past couple of years.
I think it's competitive district when it comes down to it. But, yeah, like you said, in the last couple of years, Levelland and Estacado, same as Coronado, Monterey, where they've been trading blows. And Levelland's kind of come out on top in the last couple of years. But Estacado's a different team from the last couple of years, too.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to another competitive district, a return to 4-5A, Lubbock-Cooper at Abilene-Cooper. And for the purposes of this, I think we'll try to refer to them as the Pirates and the Cougars, so we're not just saying Cooper over and over again. But the Cougars are on a 2-game losing streak now. They started the season 4-0, and they haven't won in 3 weeks because they had an open date in between their overtime loss to Austin Bowie and then last week's loss to Monterey and Lubbock. But they haven't lost at Shotwell Stadium.
I think they're going to come in hungry, but Cooper is so resilient that it's going to be a tough game for them. Lubbock-Cooper, we saw them in the regular season, just coming away with these wins and being able to kind of escape from some of them too, and that's big, I think, in the preseason, kind of heading into this one. So we'll see how the Cougars do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Pirates, you're looking at 4 teams right now that you think are going to be pretty competitive. Abilene-Cooper, despite having the loss, is a team that looks pretty well built to contend if it can steal one down the road, particularly from the Pirates. But the Pirates are just built differently than Monterey, Coronado, and Abilene-Cooper. They lean on their defense. Yeah,
they're built differently than most 5A teams. I would say 5A, 6A teams. Cooper leans on their defense, or they have the luxury of doing so, I would say, because they've just been defensively sound in the last couple of years and have just picked that up where it left off last year.
Yeah, I'd say this game is going to come down to who controls the tempo of the game, because the Pirates score 29.3 points per game. They give up 19.5. That's a really nice margin. And the Cougars, they allow 32.6 points per game, but they score 46.3. So I think it's really just going to depend on who wins in setting a tone in this game and the way they play. If it's fast-paced, I think that it's the Cougars' game to win. If it's slow-paced, I think that the Pirates will come out on top.
And that's where the Pirates kind of thrive, or they're really good in that aspect and making you play at their speed. So.
And how so? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think defensively they're able to switch out a lot of their front line, so everybody's fresh. And when you have a fresh player kind of coming out on every down, they're playing 100%. They're able to limit you in what you're able to do and make you extend your drives to maybe 16 plays, or maybe even just a dozen plays. But whenever that happens, I think you're playing their game and playing into their tempo.
Right, and key football stat, once a drive hits double digits, it's twice as likely that there's going to be a turnover in that span. It's hard to be so good for so many plays offensively.
Yeah.
You're moving closer to making a mistake the longer your drive takes to reach the end zone.
Yeah, and Lubbock-Cooper, the Pirates, are a team that'll make you do that. So I think when you're playing a game of tempo, it's tough to establish that fast tempo on Lubbock-Cooper. But if any team's going to do it, Abilene can.
That's going to be a fun game to pick. Once again, if you've just joined us, we'll be picking these key 5 games we've identified after we go through them. The next game, this one is really interesting, and it's from another competitive district, District 2-2A Division 1. And we've got Sundown at Hale Center. Both these teams were unbeaten heading into district. Both of them lost last week. Sundown fell to Abernathy, and Hale Center got surprised by Floydada. So you got 2 teams hungry, and if they're going to contend for this thing, now's the time to get back into it.
I'll say one thing about Sundown is, and everybody mentioned this, I got to go out to the Abernathy Sundown game, but they're playing a different style of football than they have in the past. They're spreading the ball out a little bit more, whereas opposed to they used to just try to run it down people's throats. That's kind of Hale Center's MO right now, and playing some spread football. And it's going to be interesting when these 2 teams meet. They both got talented quarterbacks, And like you said, they're both hungry for that first win after going, lossless in the regular season.
I really couldn't find any separation between these two teams when investigating, from common opponents to their defensive and offensive averages. I mean, get this. Sundown, 40 points per game, 23.5 allowed. Hale Center, 38.3 points per game, 17.5 allowed. Two have key quarterbacks, Brandon Castillo and Christian Huey. They're both at about 1,500 total yards. Both played Morton. Hale Center beat Morton 50-14 in week 1. Sundown beat them 69-0 in week 2. Where is the difference in this game?
I wouldn't be able to put a pin on it really, because these two teams are very similar and they kind of look it whenever you see them on the field. I got to see Hale Center in a scrimmage and Sundown last week, and I mean, aside from jersey color, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference in some of the things that they bring to the field. But in a game where two offenses look similar and they've both played some pretty competitive defensive downs, it might turn into another game of possession.
Exactly.
Whoever holds the ball the longest.
And I was just going to go back to the point when we end up making every week in these evenly matched things. It really comes down to the turnover margin.
It really does, and I'm pretty sure that in 2-2A, every coach knows that, and it's very competitive. We had Coach Daly on the coaches show, and he was very complimentary of all the coaches in that district and what they bring every day to the field.
Absolutely, and that's going to be a fun one to pick, but we'll move on. Probably running a little bit long at this point. We'll go with our final game we've identified from TAPS Division III District 1. Munster Sacred Heart is coming to visit Lubbock Christian, and historically this has been a really big game for the district, and it probably will be again, because these are the final two teams that don't have a loss within the district. Both teams coming in at 2-0 within TAPS District 1, TAPS Division III District 1. Sacred Heart with a 5-2 record overall, Lubbock Christian with a 5-1 record overall, and which is, once again, it's always been a competitive game to determine the district champion. And Lubbock Christian got this win last year, but before that they've been playing every single year since 2010, and it's always been Sacred Heart coming out on top. So there's some history to this game. 6 p.m. kickoff at Lena Field in West Lubbock.
This could mean a district title for one of the teams. Lubbock Christian, and they both come in hot to this game. So, like you said, it's going to be a fun one to watch. I believe this one is going to be, or I think this game might boil down to another defensive game for both teams, and it should be a good one. Agree.
And this is a Sacred Heart team that scores 40 points per game, but Lubbock Christian's defense is way above average. I think it's leading the district right now. And then they have a shared common opponent already, Trinity Christian. Lubbock Christian beat Trinity Christian 2 weeks ago, 31-17. Actually, that was 3 weeks ago. And then Sacred Heart beat Trinity Christian last week, 27-12. Both of those games were road games for Trinity Christian. So there's your common opponent. I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think that's a good one to get out to, and you can make it early because it's a 6 p.m. game versus all these 7:30 p.m. kicks.
Like you had mentioned in the past, they've always been real competitive against each other, and I'm excited to see if Lubbock Christian can keep what it's done in the last year or so going, as far as winning another district title and making a pretty good playoff run.
So historically, we've circled back around the whole way, but we're gonna go inverse order tonight. We're just gonna start back with Sacred Heart and Lubbock Christian when we make our picks. And I want to know your pick first on this game.
I'm going to go Lubbock Christian. I think they've lost some players, some key players, but they've also returned enough on defense and on offense to make them still competitive in this district. And I think that they're hungry right now for another district title. If you go down to Lubbock Christian, they work hard, and I think they're a hungry team.
I agree with you. I think it took a long time for Lubbock Christian to build up the culture of its program and be where they want it to be. But I think that they're about there now. And winning at Munster last year, I think was a pretty big deal. That was a 28-7 win. Retained some key players. Hunter Pinatello is a guy that I think is kind of a banner carrier for this program.
Yes,
he's back,
definitely.
Athletic, can play a wide variety of positions, most importantly running back, and I think running the football is going to be big in this one, slowing down an offense that averages about 40 points per game.
Yeah, I completely agree. Caddison Rogers, another good player at defensive end. I think these are all state returners from last year.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a good game.
Okay, Hale Center and Sundown.
Hale Center and Sundown. This one we might split on. I have I think I'm going to go Sundown on this one. I was impressed with their new offense against Abernathy. They weren't able to kind of get a lot going against the Antelopes, but I think Sundown might end up winning this one, but I think it's going to be in the high margins. It's going to be a close game, but a high-scoring affair.
Well, I feel like I cheated you out because I did one more thing to try to find separation between these two teams, and I really like Hale center running back Jesse Hinojosa, 608 rushing yards, on pace for a 1,000-yard season. When you have two quarterbacks that kind of do it all, both at 1,500 total yards, two offenses and defenses that have margins within one possession both ways, I think it comes down to the running game. And I think that when you can run the football effectively, you're not passing, you're not as prone to turnovers. And I'm going to go with Hale center just because of Jesse Hinojosa. So big gamble there, I feel like. But I think that's the most evenly matched of these games this week.
Yeah, I think if either team you go with, you got a good bet coming in because it's going to be a good game.
Okay, Lubbock-Cooper at Abilene-Cooper, a 7:30 p.m. kickoff at Shotwell Stadium on Friday.
I'm going to go with the Pirates in this one. I think Lubbock-Cooper is just a hard team to beat in general, and they're going to make Abilene kind of slow down to their tempo. So I got the Pirates coming into this one.
See, I'm thinking the opposite. I've got the Cougars in this one. I think that their offense is pretty fast-paced. I don't think that you can depend on them to turn the ball over 3 times and lose a turnover battle -3. So it just comes down to who dictates the pace. And with the great defense, you can do that. I think that Cooper will slow them down, or that the Pirates will slow them down. But I think that there are a lot of offensive weapons, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if the Pirates came back and won this one. I think that that's the second toughest game to gauge.
I think it's always good when we got some competition going here. So.
Okay, Levelland at Estacado. That's the 7 p.m. kickoff tomorrow at Lowry Field, available for everyone.
Estacado's a hard team to beat. They're very hard to contain offensively, and defensively they've been really sound this year. I'm going to have to go with the Matadors in this one. I will say that Levelland, with the season that they have right now, I think they had a good turnaround considering how many seniors they lost and under a new coach. I think they're in a good place still.
Yeah, I feel like Estacado is very consistent. I'd expect that to keep going.
Yeah.
Can't play down to the level they did to Mountain View last week. I think that Levelland has a lot more key weapons, and I think that if they let them hang around, that Levelland will come out with this win. But I feel like, for the most part, Estacado's been consistent this year. Both teams played shallow water. Both teams beat shallow water, but Estacado did it at a much bigger margin. So shallow water beat Levelland, so there you go.
So you're taking the Matadors as well?
I'm taking the Matadors,
okay.
Yes.
We'll agree on that one.
Okay, and then the big granddaddy of them all, Monterey at Coronado.
This one it's tough for me to pick just because I think both teams are really sound right now and they're playing some of their best ball. But at the end of the day, I may just go with who I kind of see coming, in first in this district, and that's Coronado. I think offensively and defensively, they're a really well-built team. And it's another one of those games that I could go either ways, but in this instance, I'm going to go Coronado. I'm going to go with the Mustangs.
Yeah, I'm going to go Coronado as well. I think they've been pretty consistent up to this point in time. You never really know what Monterey team you're going to get, and they have a history of building up some pretty large leads. Last week, 20-0, but allowed Abilene-Cooper to kind of reel back into that game. Coronado doesn't do that. Coronado, when they get up, they tend to stay up. I think that they have the more proven players on defense, but I really like Monterey's offense, so I think it could be a shootout.
So are you going Coronado?
Going Coronado.
Okay. It'll be an interesting week come Friday night.
Absolutely. So we really appreciate you guys hanging out with us for the past 25 minutes. It's been a lot of fun. We will be back on Friday evening with the Lone Star Varsity postgame show where people are going to have to eat some crow. But yeah, we really appreciate you guys coming in. The show is brought to you by UMC, and continue to check out LoneStarVarsity.com, the website. We're going to have game previews coming up in the near future. I think you're working on a really cool feature story right now. And of course, we'll have anything that breaks between now and Friday. So really appreciate you guys listening in, and we'll see you next time.